Sometimes I feel like we should play music, like on The Price is Right or something. Like, come on down, da da da, da da da. Nobody? All right. Thank you, one random person. Thank you.
Nice. Is this on? Thank you. Is this on? Okay, great. Thanks, everyone, for staying for this panel, rescheduling Playbook. And I think Kim gave us a good segue to asking your Congress people about rescheduling. So my name is Lauren Laplante. I'm with Spokes Digital. We provide performance marketing to brands and dispensaries. I want my panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start with Howard.
Hi, thanks. It's great to be here. Howard Schacter, I'm the Chief Communications Officer for MariMed. We're a multi-state operator, headquartered in the Boston area, but with operations in 8 states and a few other licensed states. So we're vertically integrated with a host of brands, dispensaries, and the like. Thrilled to be here.
What's up, everybody? I'm Kyle Sherman, founder and CEO of Flowhub. We're a technology company that's been serving dispensaries for over 10 years with retail management software. And we are now one of the fastest growing companies on the tech side of the space. We serve thousands of dispensaries across 30 states and a few countries. We're backed by PayPal, Kraft Heinz, Jay-Z. I'm also shooting a show called The Great American Dispensary Tour, which maybe some of you have seen online. We're shooting one episode here in DC, which has been a lot of fun, exploring the country and the front lines of the space. But super stoked to be here, talking about rescheduling.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff Freeman, co-founder of Mfused. Most of you guys don't know me. You won't find me on LinkedIn or on the web, but I own one of the largest brands in the country that's independent, minority owned, and cannabis I didn't choose cannabis chose me. For context here, guys, I'm kind of the poster child for some of the things in the war of drugs, the impact on the war on drugs. So my father was murdered in a drug deal when I was a kid, and I really avoided the space, and then doubled down when my mom wanted medical cannabis, and use that to really entrench myself, dig in and leverage my background, my family's background, access from the West Coast, and partnered with 2 phenomenal co-founders, and this year we'll eclipse 14 million devices sold and about $500 million in retail sales. We're your 10-year overnight success story.
I will heed all of my time to learn more about your story. That's amazing.
I love to hear everybody's why. So let's get started here with the big picture. So if rescheduling moves ahead, what's the first operational ripple effect that you think we'll feel? I'll start with Kyle.
Yeah, one of the things that's plagued our industry for a long time, and I think some people figured out some workarounds, is this tax code called 280E, and I think we all are pretty aware of what that means in this room. But upon rescheduling, Schedule 3, 280E would go away, right? And so that has an immediate financial impact for a lot of dispensaries across the country and a lot of operators in general. And what does that really mean, right? Like if 280E goes away, suddenly, margins increase like overnight, right? Like you've been operating in survival mode, and suddenly now there's, kind of a breath of fresh air. And that's going to be really interesting. It's going to create some momentum in the space again. You're going to kind of start to see a bull market. You're going to see some, kind of accelerated consolidation. You're really going to see some interesting pricing dynamics occur. I think the most fascinating thing, though, if you really tug on this and you think about, fast forward the clock a little bit post Schedule 3, you're going to start to see additional price compression. Right now, suddenly, I think you have a lot of operators who had that initial margin jump start to realize that things are going to get really tight again. And so I think this is going to force a lot of dispensaries to move from survival mode into really operating like real retail. And I think, it's going to be very fast to see how long that takes. I'm not quite sure like how long that arc takes post rescheduling, but that's the first thing we're going to notice. I think it's going to be a pretty big financial impact across, plant-touching companies in this space.
How about from an operations perspective or compliance perspective? Anyone else?
Well, I think, from an operations perspective, yeah.
Please? No, well, I would say, so you're 100% right. I would just ladder on to what you're saying. At the end of the day, the most immediate impact, certainly for companies like ours, will be the elimination of 280E and what that does for cash flow and margins for sure. And so that translates to investment in product, innovation for sure, quality of everything that we do, marketing, et cetera, and the customer experience at retail. We don't manage our business quarter to quarter or Schedule 3 or not, but we scenario plan. And so, for sure for us, we lean in heavily on brand. We believe the future, the winners on the podium will be those with the biggest and strongest brands. And so for us, we're leaning in terms of scenario planning for when Schedule 3 kicks in, more of the kitty going into product innovation and brand expansion than the others.
What's interesting to think about, right, in Canada, I often think about this, is that capital doesn't really stay in our industry like it should. Right? There's a lot of capital being siphoned out of the industry, specifically in this case, 280E that we're talking about, right, back to the federal government. And that's very different from other industries, right? Other industries, you find you get money flowing back into the industry and it creates growth and momentum inside the industry. And I think this is one of the few industries, I've been in it for a long time now over a decade, and to see how much money has actually been siphoned out of the industry is kind of absurd. And so it stunts the growth of the industry. It caps the growth, right? And I think I think about it all the time, and I think this is a moment where we finally would start to see that stops happening. At least a component of it, right? There's just been so much money taken out of the space. Right. You basically prevent innovation from occurring in that scenario. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, on behalf of brands, we're bootstrapped, we're self-funded, so zero outside debt or zero outside capital. So for us, it gives us access to affordable lines of credit, right? So now we can double down, triple down on our products, our technology, the tools that we're generating that have already proven to create success for us. We've been successful without verticals, without retail shelf space to swap, and profitable every single year. So there are going to be a lot more people like myself representing a brand that can now double down and invest into things that are more traditional for brand awareness, online, awareness, as well as, truly owning and developing technology that's complementary to sort of the mega businesses that exist that are public companies. So I think I'm a great embodiment of how that capital will be utilized.
Yeah. And let me follow on to that. Consumers are increasingly seeking precision dosing and consistency. Is that a creative constraint or a competitive advantage?
I think it's directly driven from the lack of experience with cannabis, right? And so I think what you saw early on was edible companies, the ability to scale, make the same products, be predictable across multiple markets, take that and really Trojan horse that, and you saw some really successful outfits. Ironically, I think the hemp scenario that just happened is going to create a really difficult environment for companies to do effects-based products if they're relying on minor cannabinoids that are not from the cannabis space. And so I think that is completely missed in that whole scenario is the same channels that are providing and created a hemp market are now also providing and generating your inputs. And so then furthermore, if you reschedule, you should be able to have access to, more professionals, doctors, clinical observations, trials. So then hopefully you're actually pushing, medical-based products, effects-based products that have validation and proof and not novel concepts like CBN helps you sleep.
100% agree. Look, the devil's in the details, but so I agree. We focus on precision dose, full spectrum cannabis, and effect-based brands, products across most of our brands. And as well as we do it and believe that we do it, and our industry believes that we have great product out there. The truth is, for most consumers, they walk into a dispensary today, and it's not with the same level of trust that they have when they walk into CVS and either pick up a pharmaceutical that's behind the pharmacy counter or on the shelf. They believe that what they're picking up and putting in their hand, what they're reading on that label, is going to deliver what it says because of the regulation that has allowed it to end up on the shelf. And we have a lot of work to do as an industry. And look, as they say, the devil's in the details. We don't know exactly what the FDA relationship with our industry is going to be in a post-S3 world, but it is likely to come with a lot of upheaval in what product formulations we believe we're putting out there today that do a great job.
Right. So to follow on to that, if the DEA or the FDA becomes more involved, what blind spots do you think companies should address now?
You need to be prepared to be audited, right? So auditing your supply chains, auditing your SOPs, auditing your financials, all of which that will all spur in that situation. I think being prepared for being audited, as well as pursuing, products and or formulations that you can have approved. I think a really good example is to look at what happened with Juul and their application to be able to get their formula for their vape approved, and the long line of people that sat in that queue, and the cost of that approval process was over $1 million. So think of that like you see people with strains and genetics that they will need to map, and then they will need to also be able to get certified. And that will be what potentially, dictates how you're able to brand and message. But auditing will be one of them.
Yeah, and auditing is just one little piece of what it means to be manufactured in a GMP certified kitchen. And I can tell you, in our experience, half our kitchens are GMP certified, half are not. And there is a world of difference, not only in terms of SOP, how you design, how you build, how you operate, every element of them. And I believe what may very well happen is there are a lot of brands out there that are going to be caught with their pants down when they realize that their manufacturing standards are not what they need to be in a federally regulated market.
And I think you just think about, as a manufacturer in the space, you got to make sure you've got clean data, right? I mean, it's a very, if you're going to get audited, you got to have clean data, right? If you're going to run great SOPs, you got to have clean data to work with. And so I think, as I say every year at these events, check your tech. Like, go make sure you're using the right technology platforms to serve the needs you have at, whatever stage of the supply chain you're in. It's just so critical. And I think a lot of times people, they kind of rush to, kind of just get the lowest hanging fruit technology and hey, they're all the same, whatever. And I'll tell you, that's really not true. Even at Flowhub today, our team is really, when we go think about working with a third party vendor as a technology company, we go through a pretty rigorous process to make sure that that technology vendor is going to be a great long-term partner, so we never have to leave that ecosystem, right? Because that's extraordinarily expensive. So at the fundamental level, you need to have clean data. You got to check your tech. I think it's super important. It's undervalued in this space. I think people are not doing that.
And that would be more capital and infrastructure investment, right? So maybe just based on this conversation, rescheduling would force folks to take that longer term view in terms of strategy.
Yeah, I think it's so funny, how short term views really impact the way you run your company. And I've always told our teams at Flowhub, and I've always thought about this myself, is like you got to have a multi-decade view in this space, and you can't build for next quarter. You can't build for the quarter after. You have to build for 10 years from now. And I know that's like, who knows where this industry will be in 10 years, really, right? But the point is you got to have that long-term lens on, because it changes your decision-making. It changes the culture of your teams and how they make decisions. And so you got to really, as leaders, you got to drive that into your teams and leaders at the company, because it really changes how you look at things. I mean, clearly you're doing that, right? I mean, like it's very clear that that's like how you got here, is you're thinking long term, right? You can't do that bootstrapped if you're thinking short term. So I think too many people think quarter to quarter. Wall Street's really screwed things up in that way in the hearts and minds of so many investors and operators. You got to think long term. It's hypercritical to success. So.
Yep. Let's talk a little bit about medical credibility. How can brands align with medical research and still communicate authentically with recreational consumers?
I co-founded a brand that we worked with physicians, practitioners. We did clinical observations, and I was completely handcuffed with telling people about it, right? Because of the way the regulatory environment was set up. So I could not tell them around the observations, the PhDs, the MDs, the practitioners, all of our studies, because they felt it was a competitive advantage. So by freeing this up, hopefully we can tell those stories. I think the ability to work with legitimate agencies who are running these observations that are driving towards effect-based products, actual medical-based products. I'm really sensitive to this subject. I get very predatorial in that I was not a believer in cannabis, and I did not believe in medical cannabis because I was really, impacted by the war on drugs. Again, my father's murder, so I was not a belief around that. I thought it was an excuse for Rastas to smoke weed all day, hustlers to sell weed in the free market, and enthusiasts to misclaim and misappropriate effects without any validation. And so I took it really serious, and when we decided that we wanted to make effects-based products, we led into them. It was my mother that drove me there because she wanted to use medical-based products. So I think it's the worst case of capitalism to go after people who are desperate for help with products that you do not know help them. So I think there is a requirement to work with professionals to validate these things, everything from the formulation to how the actual devices that are driving the effects or driving consumption are impacting the person. So I'm a big believer in this, and I'd love to see a deeper investment into this, but you need access to funding and or government funding, and hopefully some of these things around rescheduling would help that.
Yeah, I think rescheduling 100% really does change things, right? I mean, I think for the first time we'll actually get some evidence-based studies done, and right now the studies are just, they're like okay, right? They might be pro-cannabis, right? But if you really look at them, even in the stuff against cannabis, they're all just really shoddy research for the most part, small, groups, and it's I don't know. I hope that we get rescheduling just for the sheer fact that we actually have evidence-based studies for the first time, and we need it desperately.
I long for that day. I re-upped my medical card in Massachusetts a couple of weeks ago, and like probably many people in this room, my experience was talking to a doctor at 10:30 at night who probably went to Fred's medical school, in the Caribbean, and I long for the day of my actual general practitioner putting cannabis right up there with every other pharmaceutical that he's very happy to write a script for. So at the end of the day, research will lend itself to that much more mainstreaming, that much more education of the general medical community, and will have our deserved place where we all know it should be today.
It's, I think back to my own story and how I got into cannabis, and I got off pharmaceuticals. I got off SSRIs and anti-anxiety meds, benzodiazepines. In my early 20s, I was prescribed a bunch of this junk, and it works for some people, really didn't work for me. And I would love to understand why Harlequin, this high CBD strain, I used a Pax vaporizer morning, noon, and night. I took a couple puffs, for a year. I titrated myself off these pills without the horrible, brain zaps and side effects. I would just love to know why that worked. And I could never figure out why that worked. Even AI doesn't really know why it worked. But hopefully we'll figure it out one day with rescheduling, All
right. So for some practical information, just looking ahead, what's one strategic move businesses can make right now to be ready for rescheduling?
Well, I think we hit on it a little bit, but I would say anybody involved in brand better start auditing today exactly how the product is manufactured and whether or not the brand will need to elevate its game in terms of what the FDA is going to be looking for. That planning needs to start immediately.
So branding.
Yeah, I think, look, companies, they need to run as professionally as possible. And you shouldn't cut corners just to cut corners, right? I mean, you should build the scaffolding in your business to think again long term and these sorts of things. And I think you can't really plan for rescheduling because like who actually knows what's going to happen? And I know, look, I've over the last decade, there's so many instances where I'm like, oh, next year it's going to happen. We're going to get legalization. We're going to get something, right? And then it like doesn't happen inevitably. And if I ran Flowhub aggressively and in such a way, assuming that it was going to be true. Well, like that's like, again, like thinking short term to a certain extent because you don't really know what's going to happen. So therefore, you just have to think like long term just generally, right? Like just be professional, right? Like manufacture your products professionally. Like look at the standards of other industries. And if you do that, and you do that well over a long period of time, and you build it into the culture of the company, like you'll be prepared for anything. Because anything could happen, right? And so I just think that not enough people in our space do that today.
That's a great point that I would ladder on. The other thing we need to do as an industry a much better job of is creating the standards by which the government will accept that we know what the hell we're doing. And look, there's we shouldn't be throwing rocks. Lab testing from state to state, God knows, is very different. There's a lot of work that we need to do to tighten the ship. But if we take a page from FINRA and Financial Services or the Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, which created the movie rating system that the federal government allowed, there is an opportunity for us to develop standards. And there's been organizations out there that have tried to do really good work, but it's been in isolation. And we really do need to galvanize while there's a window to do so, to create the standards, the elevated highest standards by which we would all commit to operating.
And then I guess states can do whatever they want on top of that, right?
Of
The
course.
point is, though, is that there's some basis. And that's, I think, the best argument I've heard about if the FDA gets involved. A lot of people are freaked out. Well, I think that's maybe the benefit, is like there's some benefit there that the FDA doesn't come and audit the stores and do all this stuff, or the grows or manufacturing facilities. But it says, hey, here's the base level. Everyone has to meet this base level. And states, you can do whatever you want thereafter. But I think it's a great, I'm glad you said that.
I'll use the word short steps, long vision. Build a multi-decade business, to your point, and build a great team. Anticipate and look around corners. So things like validating the components in your hardware, validating and testing things so you understand how they're delivering, how many milligrams, what constituents are present, where you're getting to a point of toxicity, really drilling into the areas that you can own to differentiate yourself as a brand is one, beyond sort of being prepared for auditing, SOPs, formulations. That shit's table stakes, right? That needs to be the standard. It's actually drilling into areas that you can own, that you can protect, and building your business commensurate to your opportunity. I didn't get here by over-investing and trying to be the white knight, but at the same time, I understood that there was a light, and you had to get there. And so different positions, a vertical, right, is in a different scenario than an independent operator, right? So you have to build based off of your business, and then you really need to surround yourself and fill in your gaps around compliance. So doubling down when it comes to your compliance team, people that can understand how to impact what is happening and interpret, what's changing. And then furthermore, look into other industries that have been impacted. The end of prohibition or the reframing of that, as well as tobacco. I think those are two really good examples to sort of anticipate how are they going to regulate you in or regulate yourself out.
Yes, standards, having baseline standards is really important, and that's what every other well-regulated industry has. So one of my hopes for this hemp ban language that came out last week is in thinking about this rescheduling panel here, and this has been said earlier today with Boris Jordan, and a good friend of mine who's an economics professor said, after hearing this hemp ban news, the genie's out of the bottle. Right? Doesn't make sense to try to get that genie back in. So what's next? It's, I feel, about aligning all of us to settle what's going on the hemp side. And I feel very strongly that a follow-on to that would be, a natural follow-on would be rescheduling. So I'd like to turn to the panel if they have any thoughts on that, how this hemp ban language is going to impact the rescheduling?
Yeah. I wrote an essay on this on LinkedIn. Maybe some of you saw it on X. I hate the term hemp ban because it's really not, right? I mean, actually,
Yeah.
number one, it's really not a hemp ban.
I
at
put
all.
it in quotes.
Yeah, you did a good job. Putting it in quotes. But a lot of people are calling it a hemp ban. It's really redefining hemp and making it more clear. Look, there's things about it that I'm actually grateful for, and there's things about it that I don't like at all. And I think cannabis is cannabis is cannabis. And I don't see how you could get rescheduling if you have two separate definitions of cannabis. But one's like federal, sort of, kind of, and then the other's like highly regulated at the state level. And it really just creates a lot of friction where there should be no friction. Cannabis is cannabis. It produces cannabinoids and terpenes and all these things, and we should just manage that as cannabis, right? And so really, this closure is just about redefining, what is hemp. And it's, the original spirit of the 2018 Farm Bill was around textile use and these sorts of things, industrial use. It wasn't for intoxicating products, And so that's kind of what happened. I mean, as any loophole happens, things kind of go as far as they can until things break. But 39 AGs wrote a letter to the federal government. You can't ignore that. So I think it had to happen. But now I think I'd like to see, personally, rapid transformation into at least rescheduling to give everyone clarity and so that these businesses that have, a year to figure out what they're going to do in the hemp space, so a lot of great businesses in that market, hopefully there's some framework that they can continue to run those businesses just with some oversight from the federal government around, intoxicating products. So we'll see what happens. But I think this was a necessary thing that needed to occur in order for rescheduling to even be a conversation, frankly.
I have an extremely strong opinion on this one. I think the hemp market was actually reflective of the soul and spirit of the cannabis consumer. The free market nature of hemp allowed for development, innovation, creativity, community, cross-state sales. Obviously, there's the intoxicant part of the hemp, which is sort of a loophole that was found. But like I said earlier, the minor cannabinoids, CBC, CBD, CBG, some of these things would have only been really created in an environment that allowed for industrial scale. And so what it is a direct attack on the consumer. That's what it is, but it's going to require emergence of the hemp market and the adult use cannabis market. So being prepared for that. If you guys are unaware, the innovation is coming from the hemp space. Most of the people in the adult use space are dinosaurs or disconnected. And so what you can see from that space is where real innovation, real creativity, grit is coming from. And so that's going to come into play. And so how do you preserve that and how do you adopt that? So you're going to need to be prepared to work with those things. And once again, your supply chains will be impacted by the cost of minor cannabinoids that are non-intoxicating. And the products in the stores that have the most protection are effects-based products that are using minor cannabinoids, as well as innovation where the intoxicating hemp was able to drive because they had interstate commerce. So you saw the development of technology vis-a-vis China. How many of you guys get emails from WhatsApp and some factory promoting some battery and hardware? That was because they were able to sell and utilize tobacco-based technology and apply it towards hemp. Those things are not allowed in the rec market where everything needs to make money. And so what you'll see is a transformation of the industry in the next couple of years. By this next year, I predict it'll be a free-for-all, and then you'll be looking for brands to come in and disrupt the space. So I think it's going to rattle the cannabis industry in general.
I'm curious your take on the HHS now being the ones to define cannabinoids and these sorts of things in this particular legislation. Like, how does that affect your business? I'm super curious about this.
We're a formulation first business, right? But we've looked at it from a, we'll call it poly extraction, mixing different extractions while looking for particular constituents within the extract. So it won't impact me as much from a supply standpoint because we're not overly indexed towards minor cannabinoids and effects-based products, but it will impact us generally because we've been looking at things like reconstructing full spectrum products so you could have agnostic products per state. So there is that part. I'm curious, really just, it's really the supply chain, right? They have the 0.4 milligram, barrier, the limit. I think what you'll see is it drive customers potentially into adult use, but I'm not sure that those customers, some of them, low dose drinks, even want to be in there. So it's not huge in terms of where we are right now, but it does impact my product development cycle that I have for the next couple of years.
Howard, you want to chime in here?
No, I would just look. I think there's still a lot of dust to settle on this. I agree with Kyle. This is not the atomic bomb on the hemp industry that many are purporting it to be. I believe that if you're if you've got a state that has tight, safe, fair rules regulating hemp, I don't think they're rolling them back anytime soon. But if the net result is all of the bad actors in hemp go away to the benefit of the safety of America's citizens, then that is a good thing.
In 1 week, they shut down an $8 billion market that was hidden into a bill. So I consider that quite disruptive, right? Without it doesn't matter if the AG is called in, it will directly impact your business. And what that shows you is at any moment in time, if you are not doing the right things in the right circles, in the right rooms, talking to the right people, being represented like you need to be and deserve to be, something can be put on a desk and can transform your entire business, right? We're talking billions of dollars that were just removed, right? And that's low dose drinks.
Yep. Well, I want to thank everyone.
What a note to end on.
Go get them.
Let's make a last statement. I think we have time for a last statement. Howard, you want to start with a last statement?
So-
Just one thing that you want to tell the group about rescheduling.
Oh, last statement? Well, you had a question I think you were going to pose us, and maybe we ran out of time, which was if we had one line in the new federal playbook, what would it say? And I would think it would be, the forward would be something like, thanks to the legal cannabis industry for being strong partners in developing its future.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really easy to be pessimistic in this space. Trust me. It's been a wild ride. But I would just encourage everyone here to just keep your optimism up. I mean, we've made a tremendous amount of progress as an industry over the last decade. It's remarkable, actually, to look back in hindsight and see the amount of progress we've made. Now, I would have loved to have seen it move faster, right? I think we all probably maybe, for a lot of the OGs and stuff, especially people who've been here for 20 years, right? I'm sure they would have liked to see some more momentum. But at the end of the day, we've made incredible progress. And I hope that you all leave here today feeling empowered and excited about the coming years in this space. This is going to be an incredibly large industry. Alcohol in the United States is a $240 billion industry annually. And this industry is going to eclipse that. I think cannabis is going to be bigger than the liquor industry in the U.S. Now, it's going to take some time to get there, but we're on our way. So anyway, I hope you leave with that today.
You crushed that. So I think it's the fact that we're playing in the infinite game, right? The game's not going to end. There's just going to be another layer, another boss, another hurdle, and just prepare yourself, right? For what does that mean? Fall in love, I'll quote Nipsey Hussle, the marathon continues. Every year, every time something changes, you just got to be prepared for it. If it's not on you and it's in you, you'll get through it. So being optimistic, positive, rediscovering and reinventing yourself, that's what's going to be required. It's never going back. The genie's not going back in the bottle. But that's why we're all here, because we get a chance to participate in it. And I think it's just being prepared for whatever that means, right? Good, bad, indifferent, patience, and understand that there's no end to the game.
Thank you. Let's hear it for the panel. We got Jeff, Kyle, and Howard. Thank you so much.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much to that panel. Next up, we've got When Washington Moves, So Does the Money, featuring Joseph Lustberg, Mike Goral, Terry Mendez, and Anthony Caniglio, moderated by Scott Greiper. Gentlemen, come on up to the stage. Everybody else, give them a hand. And friendly reminder, if you're staying, move to the middle so people aren't stuck on the